What if your best friend vanished and no one but you remembered he ever existed? The Last Friend Request. Chapter 1. The Notification. Jesse didn't notice the notification at first. It was just another silent red dot nestled among a dozen others on his phone. Apps begging for attention like digital parasites. He tapped Instagram out of habit. His thumb hovered. Friend request. From Caleb Finch. The name hit him like a punch to the gut. Jesse blinked hard. The profile picture was an old one. Caleb's face, slightly out of focus, grinning with a taco in one hand, flipping the bird with the other. It was taken sophomore year at Taco Zone. Jesse remembered. But he wasn't supposed to remember, because Caleb was gone. 2 years ago, Caleb had vanished. Not moved away, not dropped out, just disappeared. No forwarding address, no farewell texts. Cops had looked. The school had issued a statement. Our thoughts are with the Finch family during this uncertain time. There was even a vigil. That candlelight thing in front of the auditorium with hot cider and nervous teachers watching too closely. But no body, no answers. And now, a friend request. Jesse accepted it. Immediately, his phone buzzed. A voice memo arrived. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button like it was a live wire. Then he tapped. Static, garbled distortion. Then, buried under digital noise, a whisper. Raspy, rushed, almost panicked. Remember me. The message ended. Jesse stared at the screen, waiting for something else. A second message. A follow-up. Nothing. He clicked on Caleb's profile. No posts, no mutual friends, no tags. His name wasn't hyperlinked to anything. The whole profile felt synthetic, like it had been generated, not lived in. And yet, the picture, he remembered that night. Jesse could almost hear the fluorescent buzz of Taco Zone's dying lights. At school the next day, Jesse cornered Rohan near the vending machines. Hey, weird question. Do you remember Caleb Finch? Rohan frowned. Who? Caleb. Sophomore year? Taco Zone? Always wore that NASA hoodie? Nah, man. You sure you're not thinking of someone else? Jesse forced a laugh. Yeah. He tried Jenna next, then Daniel, then even Mrs. Winley, the guidance counselor. Nobody remembered. Nobody even blinked like the name rang a faint bell. That night, Jesse dug out an old yearbook. Sophomore year. He flipped through the pages, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. Caleb's face should have been right between Farah Delgado and Gia Engstrom in Class 10B. But the page was different. The spacing was off, like someone had closed a gap, compressed the layout. Caleb wasn't there. It wasn't just that his photo was missing. It was that it never had been. Jesse rubbed his eyes. Something was wrong. He turned to the faculty section. Caleb's name wasn't in any captions, any club rosters, any photos. He flipped to the back, where signatures from classmates lived. Some childish, some crude, some genuine. See you next year, nerd. Don't forget Taco Tuesdays. See, that one was still there. The pen marks weren't pixelated or reprinted. They were real ink. Jesse touched the page, heartbeat hammering. It hadn't been erased, not yet. At 1:47 a.m., his phone buzzed again. Another message. But this time it had no sender. Not Caleb Finch, not a random number, just nothing. The message contained a single image, a photo of Jesse sleeping in his bed, taken from the foot of his mattress. His face turned toward the camera, eyes closed. Ice flooded his chest. He turned to the door. It was locked. He checked the windows, still latched. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, his mother knocked on the door, holding a tray. "Honey, I made pancakes." He opened the door. She smiled. "Thought you might need a break from your screen today." Jessie stared at her. "Do you remember Caleb Finch?" She blinked. "Who?" "Caleb. You used to drive us both to robotics camp?" "I don't think so." She looked genuinely confused. "Are you okay, Jess? I think someone's messing with me." She tilted her head. "You've been sleeping enough?" He shut the door gently. On impulse, he opened Google, typed, "Caleb Finch, Delridge High, 2023 disappearance." No results. He tried Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. Nothing. He tried just the name. Caleb Finch. Results popped up for a dentist in Idaho, a car mechanic in Sydney, and a murder victim from 1997. But not his Caleb. He scrolled, increasingly frantic. Not a single photo, not even a ghost of a digital footprint. His phone buzzed again. New voice memo. This time it was only 2 words. "Keep looking." Chapter 2. Echo Chamber. Jesse spent the entire night online, clawing through the internet like a man searching for a dropped key in the dark. Search engines yielded nothing, not even cached pages. He even tried the Wayback Machine, plugging in URLs he thought might once have held Caleb's social media. Every attempt returned a 404. By morning, his head throbbed with sleeplessness and caffeine. His eyes felt scratched raw, and every sound was slightly too loud, like the world was dialed 1 notch off. At school, things got worse. During homeroom, he slid into the seat beside Ellie Garcia. They used to hang out back in freshman year. She'd had a crush on Caleb then. Jesse remembered teasing them both for it. "Hey," Jesse said quietly, "can I ask you something weird?" She glanced at him, wary but curious. "Sure." "Do you remember Caleb Finch?" A slow, subtle shift in her expression, like a curtain was being drawn across her face from behind her eyes. "Who?" "Tall, NASA hoodie, Taco Zone?" Ellie blinked. "Is this a TikTok thing?" "No. He used to go here." She studied him, her voice light but careful. "You okay, Jesse?" "Ellie, we used to hang out with him." "You liked him?" She let out a short laugh, like air popping from a balloon. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The bell rang. She turned to face the front, leaving Jesse adrift and cold. By third period, Jesse had asked 5 more people. None of them remembered, not even half remembered. It was like Caleb had never existed at all. The worst part? Jesse couldn't trust his own mind anymore. He thought he remembered Caleb. He could picture him, sure. But what if those images were false? Implanted? Dreams mislabeled as memories? He needed proof. That's when he had the idea to check the digital archive at the library, the one that held yearbooks, student newspapers, scanned art projects dating back to 1994. He slipped out during lunch and navigated to the back corner where the dusty desktop sat, humming softly like it knew secrets. He clicked into the archive, opened the yearbook files. Sophomore year, 2023. No Caleb. He navigated to student spotlight sections, typed the name into the search field. No results. But then, he switched to thumbnail view, started scanning page by page. Page 37 caught his eye. There, an image. Low-res blurry. 3 students at a science fair booth. The left one was clearly Jesse, younger, with bad hair and a sheepish smile. The middle student had been blurred, not pixelated, smudged, like someone had dragged a digital eraser across only that part of the photo. The third student was Amy Cho. Jesse opened Photoshop and boosted contrast, sharpened edges. But the smear held firm, stubborn and intentional. And underneath the photo was the caption, Team Synapses Sync, Jesse Keller, redacted, Amy Cho. Second place, his skin prickled. That wasn't just an omission, it was a purge. He backed out of the archive and opened a private tab, logged into the admin server, a backdoor he'd set up during freshman year as a prank on the school calendar. This wasn't a prank anymore. He navigated to the student database. Search bar. Typed, Caleb Finch. No results found. He switched to raw files, bypassing user interface layers. Dug through logs and record fragments. Then, something. A folder, buried in a directory labeled Temp Archive Unsorted. File name, CAL3B.V3. No file extension, no metadata. He clicked it. The screen flashed black, then white. Then, a single line of text appeared. Return to forget. Before he could move, a shadow fell over the desk. Not your terminal, a voice said. Jesse turned. A man in a blazer stood there, tall, pale, and unfamiliar. I'm Mr. Graves, he said evenly. New ethics faculty. You're not authorized to be in this system. Jesse closed the window. I was just exploring ghosts, the man said, voice mild. Be careful. Some archives bite back. Jesse stood. You're not on the staff list. I rotate between districts. You'll find me when you need me. He turned, disappearing into the stacks. Jesse left the library feeling like he'd just stared into something cold and hungry. Back home, he sat on his bed and pulled out his old gaming console. He hadn't touched it in over a year, buried under a stack of unused controllers and dust. He remembered something. Caleb had given him a cartridge once. They'd joked about it being haunted because it glitched every time they reached level 4. But then, they forgot about it, left it inside the console, and moved on. Jesse popped open the panel. Inside, wedged just out of sight, was a USB stick. No label, except for a single strip of masking tape. Scrawled in pen, do not open. Chapter 3. Data Ghosts. Jesse stared at the USB like it might bite. It was dusty and warm from being wedged inside the console for who knows how long. The masking tape felt brittle, as if it had aged decades in 2 years. Do not open, it read, Caleb's handwriting, sharp and looping. Jesse hesitated. Every part of him wanted to obey the warning. But warnings like that don't get written unless there's something worth hiding. And Jesse had learned that hiding always pointed to truth. He plugged it into his laptop. The screen flickered, then stilled. No autoplay, no folders, just a single executable file titled echo.exe. He clicked it. The screen turned black. For a full 5 seconds, nothing. Then, a loading bar, labeled Synapse Record Recovery, Class Beta. Lines of distorted video began playing. Surveillance footage, grainy, static-filled frames showing a classroom lit by harsh fluorescence. Jesse recognized it. Room 4B, the old tech lab. In the center of the frame sat 6 students around a table, hooked to wires, monitors blinking beside them. He saw himself. Younger, paler, mouth slack. And next to him, Caleb. Alive. Laughing at something. His face clear, unblurred. Jesse's heart pounded. A distorted voice crackled from the footage. Test Group B now in sync. Commence memory fold protocol. On screen, the students' expressions changed. Blank. Disassociated. Then something strange. Caleb leaned forward, looked directly into the camera. "Stop this," he said. "They're going to forget us." The screen glitched. Lines tore through the footage. Caleb's voice warped. "They'll make you choose. Truth or being real." Then the footage cut. The program returned to the menu. One more file remained. It was audio only. Jesse clicked play. Beep. Then Caleb's voice, clearer this time. A recording. "Jesse, if you're hearing this, they didn't get to you. Not all the way. We were part of a test, something called MEMSYNC. It was supposed to help with trauma recovery, erase bad memories. Only it worked too well. They figured out how to delete people, not physically, digitally, socially, spiritually. They removed me from everything. And you helped." Jesse froze. "You volunteered," Caleb's voice continued, not knowing what it was. "But they used your tech, your code. You helped build the interface number." Jesse couldn't breathe. "You forgot." "But I didn't. I escaped before the full wipe. I hid this message. If you're listening, you've started to remember. And if that's true, they'll come for you. Just like they came for me. Beep." The audio ended. Jesse slammed the laptop shut, hands shaking. His stomach flipped. The air in his room felt thinner, like the atmosphere had been dialed down. He stumbled to his bathroom sink, splashed water on his face. When he looked up into the mirror, something twisted in his reflection. Not physically, but expressional. His reflection was staring back with something Jesse couldn't quite place. Recognition? Accusation? From behind, his phone buzzed on the desk. He walked back, cautious. A message from an unknown number. "Stop digging. You're almost gone." No name, no icon. Just those 6 words. And then his laptop screen lit up again. The desktop icons began disappearing, one by one. Photos, files, documents, until only the recycle bin remained. It too vanished. Then the screen displayed a blinking cursor. Typing began. Return to forget. Jesse pulled the plug from the wall. Darkness. Silence. He sat there, heart racing, breath shallow, the USB still warm in his hand. Caleb was right. Someone, or something, was trying to erase him next. Chapter 4. The Other One. By the next morning, Jesse felt emptied out, like someone had scooped him hollow. The USB now sat sealed inside a sock and duct-taped under his desk drawer. His laptop wouldn't boot, just a black screen, blinking cursor, like a patient in a coma. He barely ate breakfast. His mom didn't comment, just smiled too brightly, as if someone had taught her how to be a mother from a script. Outside, the sky looked pixelated, washed out and flat, like the color palette had been accidentally downgraded. At school, whispers followed him, not spoken exactly, but sensed. People glanced and looked away too fast. Teachers paused mid-roll call, like they'd forgotten why his name sounded familiar. And then he noticed her. In the back of the cafeteria, buried beneath a hoodie and noise-canceling headphones, sat Lyra Tran. She was a myth among students, a glitch girl, homeschooled for a year, rarely spoke. Some said she used to be on the robotics team. Others claimed she once hacked the school intercom to play synthwave during finals. Jesse remembered something else. She and Caleb used to play that weird Japanese puzzle game after school, the one with the neon cats and memory tiles. He approached her table slowly. Lyra didn't look up, but her hand froze over her tablet as he got close. "I know what you're doing," she said quietly. Jesse hesitated. "You do? You're chasing ghosts." She peeled off one headphone, her eyes scanning him. "Bad idea. You remember Caleb?" She exhaled sharply. "I didn't say that." "But you do." She stared at him. "Do you?" "Yes." She nodded. "Then you already know what happens next." There was silence between them. The noise of the cafeteria seemed to fade, like someone had pressed mute on the world. Lyra reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in an old sock. Another USB. "This was in my keyboard, hidden under the shift key. I forgot about it until I heard you asking around yesterday." Jesse stared. "What's on it?" "I haven't opened it. I'm scared it'll make me remember too much, or worse, forget again." Jesse reached for it. Lyra pulled it back for a second. "If you take this, they'll notice." "They already have." She handed it over. "Don't plug it in here," she warned. "Use something old. Something air-gapped. No cloud, no Bluetooth. Nothing that talks back." He slipped it into his backpack. "Why are you helping me?" She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Because I remember waking up one day and realizing my best friend didn't exist anymore. I remember sitting in class and knowing something was wrong, even if I couldn't name it. That kind of loneliness, it makes you reckless." Jesse nodded. "Caleb said we were part of something called MemSync. A trial. You think that's what this is all connected to?" Lyra's lips pressed tight. "My mom used to work in neuromarketing. Said the government was funding memory suppression models as early as 2020. PTSD, dissociative disorders, behavior correction. Eventually, they figured out memory wasn't just personal, it was social. networked, like a shared dream. If they changed enough of it, the rest would collapse naturally. Mass deletion, Jesse murmured. Exactly. They don't erase you directly. They erase the context, the people, the photos, the metadata. Soon, even you can't remember why you feel hollow. A bell rang, but neither of them moved. Are you going to open it? Lyra asked. Have to. She nodded. If it starts getting worse, if you start losing yourself, find me. As Jesse walked out of the cafeteria, he felt like he'd stepped into a film set. The lighting seemed too controlled. The students' conversations blurred into static. His own thoughts began to flicker, like damaged video frames. That night, in his garage, he powered up his old desktop, one with no Wi-Fi, no camera, and no mic. Just hard drives and humming fans. He inserted Lyra's USB. It contained only one folder, labeled Trial 7, Subject 003. Inside were audio logs, surveillance photos, a diagram labeled Memory Cohesion Map, Finch-Keller-Tran, and a final file, a video, time-stamped 1 day before Caleb disappeared. In it, Jesse stood in a white room under fluorescent lights, a clipboard in his hands, speaking to someone off camera. We'll purge Subject 002 tomorrow, Jesse said in the recording. After that, only 2 anchors remain. Then the test is complete. Jesse hit pause. His own voice, calm, authoritative, unrecognizable. He rewound, played it again. We'll purge Subject 002 tomorrow. Subject 002 was Caleb, and Jesse had approved it. He staggered back from the monitor, bile rising in his throat. From outside, a noise, footsteps, and then his phone buzzing on the desk. A new message. You were never supposed to remember. Chapter 5. Project MemSync. Jesse didn't sleep. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. The white room, the clipboard, his own voice condemning Caleb to digital oblivion. And not just Caleb. Only 2 anchors remain, he'd said. That meant Lyra. That meant him. He spent the night scouring the contents of Lyra's USB. The files were erratic, some corrupted, others password protected, but enough survived to pull shape from the haze. Project MemSync, Phase 3. Sponsors: Aegis Behavioral Institute, Defense Department Subcontractor, D143. Objective: controlled erasure of high-trauma memories via synchronized social redaction. Subjects: Finch, Caleb, Keller, Jesse, Tran, Lyra. Others: redacted. Method: target shared memories through artificial sleep episodes induced during subliminal trials. Post-trial reinforcement by a digital scrub and relational anchor reset. He scrolled through interview transcripts, intake questions, post-session recordings, metadata tagged with the kind of language that made your skin crawl. Does Subject 001 retain emotional residues? Monitor Subject 003 for recursive trauma flare-ups. Ensure anchors remain unaware of initial volunteer status. One folder labeled Session Logs contained time-stamped MP3s. Jesse clicked on one marked SR003 Confession. Static. Then his own voice. They said it was therapy. Said we were helping people forget the worst days of their lives. I didn't know they meant people. I didn't know forgetting could spread like a virus. The audio crackled. I remember Caleb waking up too early in the cycle. He screamed. Said everything was wrong. He tried to rip off the electrodes. They sedated him. I was told he was reallocated. I thought that meant transferred. Jesse paused the file. The air around him felt heavier now, like gravity itself had grown suspicious. He leaned back, closing his eyes. Flashes of the trial surfaced, white rooms, humming machines, whispered directives behind mirrored glass. He remembered Caleb turning to him once and saying, "What if forgetting isn't healing? What if it's a slow erasure?" The screen flickered again. One last file. Final protocol. Inside, a video compilation. Rapid cuts of Subject 002 Caleb before and after each session. His smile fading, his eyes hollowing out. Then, one last clip. Caleb staring directly at the camera. If you're watching this, then Jesse remembered. And that means it's your turn. Jesse leaned closer. You were complicit, but you were also scared. That's what they preyed on. Your fear, your need to belong. You wanted to help, but you can still make it right. The feed cut. Jesse sat motionless. Then he opened his email client. Attached everything. The audio logs, session data, sponsor info, Caleb's message. Drafted a message to 50 journalists, 3 whistleblower forums, and a conspiracy subreddit he used to laugh at. Subject line, Project MemSync, Evidence of Memory. Trials on US minors. His cursor hovered over the send button, but before he could click it, the screen glitched. The mouse moved on its own. A window opened. Command line interface. Text began typing itself. You do this, you vanish. Just like him, no memory, no rescue, no you. The cursor blinked, waiting. Behind him, the hum of electricity dimmed. His phone powered off. Router lights died. Even the street outside fell unnaturally silent. Another line appeared. You have 10 seconds to choose. Then a countdown. 10, 9, 8. Jesse stared at the screen. He thought of Caleb's laugh, of Lyra's terrified eyes, of the moment in the cafeteria when Ellie's brain seemed to skip like a scratched CD. 7, 6. The truth wasn't just remembering. It was reclaiming who he'd been before they rewrote him. 5, 4. He slammed the enter key. SEND. The files launched. The countdown stopped. Nothing happened. No explosion, no shutdown, no immediate erasure. Just silence. Then, from his inbox, a new message arrived. Sender, unknown. Subject, you chose truth. Prepare to disappear. Attached, a friend request. From himself. Only this time, the profile picture wasn't quite right. His smile was off-center, his eyes too dark, like something had copied him and forgotten the finer brush strokes. Jesse stared, then clicked, accept. Chapter 6. Upload or obey. Jesse didn't run. Not when the lights in his house flickered off. Not when his phone locked itself with a system override. Not even when he saw the unmarked black car idling silently outside his front window. He was done running. He grabbed the USB drives, his and Lyra's, and the printed documents he'd made the night before. His laptop, still intact after its brief blackout, was open to a blank upload form on a whistleblower forum buried 6 proxy layers deep. He was about to hit submit when the knock came. 3 soft taps. He opened the door. The man standing there was not a brute. He wore no sunglasses, no badge, just a gray suit, collar slightly wilted, like he'd been wearing it too long. He carried a leather folder and looked at Jesse the way a doctor might look at a terminal patient. "Mr. Keller," he said, "I'm with a division you haven't heard of. We're here to offer closure." Jesse didn't move. The man stepped in uninvited, glancing around the house as if checking for cameras. "You've uncovered more than you should have." "That's impressive, but predictable." He opened the folder and slid a piece of paper across the table. It was blank. "What's this?" "A contract," the man said. "Metaphorically speaking." Jesse frowned. "Sign it," meaning agree in principle, and everything returns to normal. You go back to school. Your digital footprint gets restored. The gaps in your memory reseal. You remain real. "And if I don't?" The man sighed like a tired teacher explaining a lesson one too many times. "Then you upload that file. And you disappear. Gradually. First from the internet, then from school records, from people's minds, finally, from yourself. You erased Caleb. He chose exposure and was forgotten by design. You'll do the same to me." The man gave a half nod. "There are worse things than being forgotten, Jesse." Jesse clenched his fists. "Like what?" "Being remembered. Wrong." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're a hero. But MemSync wasn't about control. It was about mercy. We gave broken minds peace. And you volunteered to help build that system. We just helped you forget that part." The folder remained on the table, blank as the day it was manufactured. Jesse looked down at it, then at the USB in his hand, then at the laptop. "Last chance," the man said, backing toward the door. "Be real, or be erased." Silence fell. Jesse sat down at the keyboard, opened the upload portal. The man didn't stop him. He just watched. Jesse hovered over the button. His finger trembled. He thought of Caleb's eyes, locked onto the camera in that grainy footage. He thought of Lyra's hands shaking as she handed him the USB. He thought of himself, torn in two. And then he clicked. Upload. The files launched. Status bar. Uploading. 87%. 94%. 100%. The man at the door closed the folder. "So be it," and walked away. As he vanished into the night, Jesse's inbox pinged. One new message. No sender, no subject. Just a single word in the body. Welcome. Upload or obey. Chapter 7. The Mirror Friend Request. Jesse woke to silence. Sunlight streamed through his blinds, ordinary and golden. Birds chirped outside like nothing had ever happened. His phone buzzed gently on the nightstand. No blackout, no static, no warning messages. For a moment, it felt like the world had rebooted, clean and wrong. Had he dreamt it? He sat up slowly, scanning the room. His laptop rested on the desk, lid open, humming quietly. When he tapped the trackpad, the screen blinked to life. Inbox, one new message. From unknown. Subject, welcome back. Attached, a friend request. Sender, Jesse Keller. He froze. The profile photo was almost right. It showed him at his desk, looking into the camera, smiling. But something was off. The eyes were too sharp. The lighting didn't match. The smile was hollow, slightly asymmetrical, like someone had reconstructed him from memory but missed the soul behind the grin. Jesse clicked the profile. Everything was duplicated. Photos, status updates, even old group chat threads. But none of them felt lived in. They were flat, staged, a perfect replica, with no weight. He hovered over the accept button. Outside his door, he heard footsteps, his mother's voice, cheerful and distant, calling out, "Breakfast, Jesse." Something in her tone rattled him, a little too scripted, a little too timed. He walked to the mirror across the room. His reflection blinked. He hadn't. He touched the glass. His reflection moved a half-second behind. On the laptop, the friend request pulsed gently. Waiting. Jesse returned to the screen. He stared at the button. Behind him, his reflection smiled again, just slightly too wide. The inbox pinged a second time. New request. Sender, Jesse Keller, .02, and then a third. Jesse Keller, .03, Jesse Keller, .04. He stepped back. The laptop screen began to fill, row after row of pending friend requests, all from himself, all with the same not quite right profile picture. And Jesse understood, finally. He hadn't just exposed Project Memsync. He'd triggered recursion. Now they were all coming back. Versions of him. Versions they'd tried to forget. Each one whispering the same thing. Remember me. The end.